Welcome back into another episode of ROC Boys football. We are continuing with our team previews as the season inches closer to opening kickoff. With this episode, we're going to be doing the Oklahoma Sooners, who in both our minds are a bona fide national contender. Many OU fans have been waiting for a year that Alabama or LSU kind of take a step back. OU had two really good years the last couple of seasons and just kind of ran up against some of the better teams in Alabama and LSU that we've seen in a really long time. So they couldn't capitalize. But this year they returned a tremendous amount of talent from last year, which was an impressive year for them after a rough start. And we think that they're going to be really good this year. Without further ado, we're going to start with the quarterback as we normally do, Spencer Rattler. Dale, what do you think about
him? For me, top quarterback probably this year, talent-wise, and what I'd project as success-wise. I thought he got really good by the end of the year last year. He started off really kind of poorly, but he really stepped up and took care of business by the end. So I think with the way Lincoln Riley's developed quarterbacks and sort of the path that he's already kind of seems to be on, I think you're going to have a really good year for Rattler and make that offense really high powered like we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think on both our boards, he's the number one quarterback for the 2022 NFL draft. Tremendous arm talent. What we really talked about is he just needs to limit those turnovers, which were kind of biting him a little bit early in the season. For the rest of the way, he was extremely efficient, didn't turn the ball over very much, and kind of just settled into that role. I think many people forget that was his first year starting last year. So obviously there are going to be some hiccups as a redshirt freshman, but I think he's going to take a massive step and probably be the first overall pick next year. But what's even more intriguing to this storyline is the talent around him. I'm going to start with the backfield of OU. Kennedy Brooks opted out last year, but he'll be back. And then they're going to bring in that transfer from UNC, Erice Gray, who's wearing the 0 for them. And he's very talented running back in space. And I think OU is going to try to use him there. Kind of get him some swing passes, get him some zone stretches that's kind of where he excels at. So I'm really excited to see this two-headed monster tailback and maybe develop a little bit of more of a run game that was kind of maybe absent last year with Trey Sermon transferring out and Kennedy Brooks opting out. So I think they're going to kind of get back on. I mean, I don't mean to say Ramondre Stevenson wasn't good for them, but maybe a little bit more explosion out of that backfield. And so I think a lot of OU fans can be really excited about that.
No, I legit think Erice Gray is going to be really productive there.
Yeah,
I think Kennedy Brooks is fine. I don't mind them, but I think Erice Gray is incredible. And if he didn't have to like split carries with his fellow at Tennessee, the guy who's on UNC Chandler, I think he has a massive year last year, and I think he was the better of the two. He's more explosive, and that style probably fits the Big 12 a little better. It's not as heavy of a style as maybe Ty Chandler, but it is a more athletic, little more explosive, good in space. So I do think his game will fit Oklahoma really well. I think.
Better than Ramondre Stevenson's. And again, not to take anything away from Ramondre Stevenson, he runs a little bit different. He's kind of more between the tackles, kind of a bruiser. I think he's 220, so he's big and maybe not as explosive in the open space, which is kind of what you do in the Big 12 and soon to be SEC, I guess, where you want to get your playmakers in space. So I think Erice Gray and Kennedy Brooks are kind of a little bit better fit for this Oklahoma offense. I think we'll see them kind of excel in that role, especially Erice Gray, who I think will end up leading that team in the backfield. And when you move on to wide receivers, where it's just another absolute stockpile of weapons there. Obviously, we start with Marvin Mims, who we don't really need to say too much about him. Very, very impressive freshman year, and you got to think he's only gonna get better as going into next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly the guy. Obviously, love him as a player, but I don't know that I see it as like a wildly talented bunch as you maybe do.
Because I think
I don't love Drake Stoops, and he plays a fair amount. And I'm not like in love with Theo Weiss either. I think he's a solid player, but it's not like I think you have one really good player. I think the X factor probably going in this year is Jaden Hazelwood. If he can live up to the hype he had as a recruit to be a top 10 guy nationally, we've seen very little from him. I get that injuries might be playing a part, but at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, he needs to perform and play at a high level. And if he doesn't, like, you're not looking at a wideout room that's going to be particularly competitive when you play the big boys in the SEC. I think they're going to be fine and they'll get through it, and it's not going to be a huge issue. But I'm not looking at this room like this is like Bama last year, LSU the previous year. That's not what they're going to have if Jaden Hazelwood doesn't play at an NFL level, and he hasn't shown it yet. I don't see the other two, Weiss and Stoops, as those type guys. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Stoops. I get he's kind of more maybe that slot, like gritty guy. I don't think he'll play that much if everybody remains healthy. I'll tell you a name to watch, and I don't know if you know much about him because I don't think you watched the spring game. I did know who flashed. True freshman Mario Williams. Dude is an absolute beast. Really good after the catch. He only weighs like 170 pounds, so ideally throughout the summer you get a little bit more muscle on him, get him that college body. But he is very good in space, and he's honestly just like a clean, like very polished wide receiver for an 18-year-old kid. So that's another name to watch. But I think what you got to be excited for as an OU fan is it's a lot of talent. So there's a group of 4 or 5. I mean, Marvin Mims is a bona fide stud. You know that. And then you have Jaden Hazelwood, Theo Weiss, and now add Mario Williams, who, I mean, you got to be excited that one or two of them is going to hit and be really, really good for you, if not all of them. And Spencer Rattler doesn't need the best receivers. You know, it's just he's going to make it happen.
I don't mean to say they're not like – it's not going to be a bad unit, but like you're talking like, do I think it's top 5 in the country? Like we'll see how other teams shake out, but that's not what
fringe,
I like.
But top 5 is good. It's fringe. I think.
Yeah, but if we're going to talk about them taking the next step, it's kind of the point where Oklahoma's at now. Like, are they going to walk into the games against Alabama and be a little more competitive? Not that they haven't been, but like sometimes they don't look the part. I don't think when they're playing.
Yeah, I probably disagree
those playoff
with that.
games. So what do you disagree with? That they haven't like?
No, I think these wide receivers are going to be very, very. I mean, you've seen a lot of good receivers go through Oklahoma. CeeDee Lamb kind of jumping out of the screen. Like they've had decent wide receiver play. I think when they don't match up with those SEC teams, for one, it's been like a Bama they played LSU 2 years ago, and LSU was just a wagon. But they competed with Georgia the other year. Those are the kind of
did 1 year. They had 1 year with Baker where they really looked competitive.
They played that Alabama team 1 year, decently close. I think it was a 10-point game. So
close. I think the score looked close, but if I recall, that was very uncompetitive in the first half, and they snuck back in a little bit. So.
Yeah,
that always gives me cause to pause on whether the teams are really as close as maybe a final score indicates. And
yeah, I mean,
I just don't see it. Do you think any of these guys are first round picks, right? Like,
yeah, I think Marvin Mims has a very good shot once he's eligible. He's obviously not. I think he will be for sure.
We'll see.
At least has a good chance. Obviously, a first round pick. You don't have to be a first round pick to be like a very good receiver. Like
you need one to be a first round pick to have a really great room, though. You definitely do. Think of a team that's had a good room that hasn't had a top maybe 15 pick.
Clemson, T. Higgins, Justin Ross.
But that wasn't like a great Clemson wideout room with Higgins and Amari Rodgers. It was okay, but
yeah, I don't know. I guess we just disagree a little bit on those wide receivers. And I see what you mean. I don't know if any of them have like really taken that step and showed they can, but I think there's a lot of, again, I hate these are stockpile again, but stockpile. There's a group of 4 or 5 guys that have the ability to, and they're young. So you think they're going to take the next step. It's hard to come in as an 18-year-old and be that dude in the Big 12 and Big 12 maybe, but in college football in general. So I think they're going to take a step. Let's move on to the offensive line, where historically, like OU doesn't have the best line. Obviously, Creed Humphrey was really good for them last year. This year, I think they're going to be really solid up front. I think Eric Swenson's really good. I think Wanya Morris coming over from Tennessee is really big. I think he'll anchor at that left tackle spot.
See, that's interesting you talk about Swenson because, like, I think obviously Wanya Morris, I think, is a far better player than Eric Swenson. I think Eric Swenson is okay, but I don't think he was, like, the anchor, in my opinion. He wasn't, like, he's not the guy you want at left tackle per se, and that's who he was playing. And I think it's in my opinion, a pretty good upgrade getting Wanya Morris, who was very solid at Tennessee, and kind of pushing Eric Swenson either over to the right or just relegating him to the backup, because that Anton Harrison at right, who played a little bit last year when there were some injuries, I thought he was pretty solid. So,
and I believe Anton Harrison was a freshman, so again, one of those guys that I think I believe in it a little bit more than you, but you kind of expect those guys to take that next step as you move into your second, third year.
But elsewhere there, it's like I do think it's a very, essentially you're going to get back four of the four guys who were really played a lot, and the only place you're going to have to replace is the
center position, which I don't want to like understate that, because I think Creed Humphrey
was really good.
And not only was he really good, but I think he was kind of like that captain leader calling out blitzes. He was really smart. And so it's not only are you losing a really good player, you're kind of losing a leader up there. So you're going to kind of have to look to somebody else to kind of step up. I think it'll help with Spencer Rattler maybe getting a little bit more experience too, and being able to call out blitz pickups as well. So obviously
the guy's coming in is probably going to be a senior though. So either Murray or McIver. So they're going to have a guy who's been around, granted maybe not playing so much, but but they're going to have experience there, and I think
they're good. They're just good. I think this line's good. Yeah. So this offense is, you got to think, going to be a top 5, top 3 statistically, especially playing in the Big 12. But
certainly
they're not going to get stopped unless they turn. I mean, the only thing that hurt them is they put up points. They just turned the ball over too much. So you gotta.
And really, once they kind of got rolling by the end, they were really good.
Once Spencer Rattler, they lost to Kansas State and Iowa State early, and then they just ripped apart. They just ripped through. And honestly, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they would give some of those playoff teams minus Alabama like a run. Like, they were one of the better teams after those losses.
Oh, last year, yeah, for sure.
And you'd expect they return a lot, so you'd expect that to kind of continue coming into this year. And let's move over to the defense, because I think this is where my brother and I think this is why OU has a chance to win it all. Historically, OU kind of just looks a little out of place on defense. You watch them Georgia, watch them play Alabama, watch them play LSU, like they kind of get the ball run down their throats a little bit. This is not going to be the case this year. This defense returns a lot of talent, especially in that front seven, on that D line especially.
Certainly the front four. The front four is going to be savages.
Yeah, let's talk about those guys. I know. I want to hear what you have to say about Isaiah Thomas, because I know you love him, before we get into anybody else.
Isaiah Thomas is one of my all-time favorite players for this year. I think the fact that he isn't mentioned as a top tier defensive guy, it seems like all the time, and is crazy to me. I think when you have the athleticism to play on the inside like that, but also not get pushed around, to me, I think he was far better than Perion Winfrey, who I also think is very good. It's just, I love Isaiah Thomas. I thought what he was doing was just being the ultimate disruptive, athletic, new age defensive tackle. And I get that he's 270 pounds.
They kind of kick him out sometimes, so.
But it didn't matter. He was playing mostly on the inside, and
wherever
he was
dominant. He was good. And let's talk about Perion Winfrey, who is honestly just as good. His stats don't necessarily reflect it only having a half sack and 5.5 TFLs. But if you watch him in that Iowa State game, the Big 12 championship game, they couldn't block him. He was too fast and too strong for those guys inside to block him. He was wreaking havoc. And again, some of those D tackles like Perion Winfrey don't get enough love sometimes on the stat sheet for what they do, but they're busting up pockets and just kind of what you said, wreaking havoc. So Isaiah Thomas, Perion Winfrey, and then obviously we don't want to forget Nick Bonito, who had an incredible season last year. Very good athlete, and you kind of like another one of those guys who's only his second year playing, and you would think he might take another step as well out of an 8-sack season. So I mean that's that front four, front seven is.
I mean, you got 3 bona fide pros. I think 2 are like Nick Bonito. I think is very likely going to be a first round pick this year. I think Isaiah Thomas is probably not going to be just because of the size, but I think in terms of like production, he's there. It's like
because Isaiah Thomas is tough because you're right. His size, he can't really play tackle, and then he's I don't know if he has like enough of the athletic.
Well, he's not a good. He's not a DN. He'd be playing now, but Winfrey, he's definitely got a shot to be a first rounder, and I'm interested to see what happens with Thomas because I think he's first round talent. I think he does have an odd position situation, but super talented, really productive group. And when you have 3 guys up front who all can create havoc, rush the passer, and have 2 guys who are run stoppers, that's really helpful, especially looking at their linebackers, who to me, I'm not a fan of them. I didn't think they played very well last year. I do get that they're getting 2 of them back in Osimo and Deshaun White, but I think you're going to need to see more out of those 2 because that was their weakness to me. I didn't think they were great players.
Yeah, and again, I think Brian Osimo, he's I think this will be his third year playing. So, I mean, another younger guy who you probably expect to get it going a little bit, kind of see the field a little bit better. I think I think you might be a little harder than others. I think you had an all right season. But yeah, I think the D line is going to take a lot of pressure off those linebackers. That's for sure. And in the secondary, you think? I mean, I think they will need to, and I think they will. So I think I think they'll be all right there. I'm not too concerned about them on that, just because you have such a good D line to work off of. Their secondary, I think, was okay. I want to talk about I'm trying to bring up his name. I think his name is Pat Fields.
Pat Fields he's
I'm excited. I'm excited to see him. I think he kind of. Is it what number's Pat Fields again? I need to get his number.
He's number 10.
Did I see? I'm trying to think of one.
The other one, Delaren Turner Yell, is 32, and he, I think, in terms of safety play, and just like I'm going to talk secondary in general, I think they were actually pretty good. And even if you look at what happened, essentially, like in the beginning of the year, they were giving up 1 billion points, but a lot of that had to do with an offense that was putting them in horrible spots, too many turnovers. But once they kind of got rolling, they were shutting people down. They made it very hard on Florida in the bowl game.
That's what I was going to say. Florida, I saw it against Florida. I mean, I get it. You were working pretty much against the twos exclusively there, but I thought they were very good with getting their hands in the passing lane. And that was in my mind, looking at OU going into the 2021 season, that's encouraging, to see your guys play at a really high level against a good offense. I mean, Kyle Trask still played, and that offense is still good. So,
I mean, we're just like looking at like giving up 13 to Oklahoma State, 21 to Iowa State, and only 28 to Texas Tech.
They finished
notable games down the stretch.
They finished so strong. Their last couple of games. I mean, that's got to be so. I literally after that Iowa State game, and then they I think Texas really turned them around. They had that kind of thriller win. They just went on a tear, and I would have loved to see them play in the playoffs. So,
because it's like the first time you've ever thought like, man, Oklahoma's like really playing some defense, and I know they brought in the coach from Ohio State, Alex Grinch, to kind of get this defense moving a little bit, and it seems like it's worked because really this is when you watch them last year, you're like, wow, this defense like legit can play football, and they weren't like the greatest offense. They were good by the end, but they weren't like dominating people on offense and just putting people in shootouts. Like they were just stopping people.
They were small. I think what he did with them is just they're smaller up front. They're better athletes. I think Perion Winfrey's the heaviest guy who really plays for him, and he's 295. So
He's an athletic D tackle.
they're athletic. They're good in space, and they tackle pretty well. So that's a good recipe for having good defense. Again, I think I watched the Iowa State game most of that championship game, Big 12 championship game, to kind of prepare for this one. And I mean, that's a good team. They kind of like this. I think they just got lulled to sleep. They kind of jumped Iowa State early, and then just
that's
the game was closer than it had to be. And then you watch that Florida game, and they were back, man. So
the first half was a pretty good beating they put on them. So
all right, though. So give us that win total, and let's talk about what we think the outlook is.
I mean, they set the win total at 11 flat, which makes sense. I mean, if it was anything less, like, yeah, they're if they lose one game, like I could see it happening for sure. I don't think they're.
I think the only team that can challenge them is Texas, just because that's
they can lose to. I mean, I don't like.
That's the thing. Oklahoma always seems to lose a game. They always seem to lose a game. I think this team is the best we've seen, this Oklahoma team, so maybe they don't.
It's the first time they've played defense, which kind of allows you to nullify the chance that Texas Tech type team is just going to score 70 points and you throw one pick and it's like done.
Yeah,
so like that kind of insulates them a little more from giving up those shock losses that they're pretty prone to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's not like I think the Big 12 is weak this year. I mean, not that it's not.
It's just not deep. I think Iowa State. The thing is, Iowa State's that's the best team that we've seen out of the Big 12, minus Oklahoma in a while. Like we haven't seen that many teams really push OU to win a Big 12 championship. This year, Iowa State's a bona fide contender. I think OU. This is the best OU team we've seen too, and they play late. So I'm guessing there's a chance that they're both undefeated going into that game.
It's going to be an incredible game.
It's going to be a good game. We'll probably see a rematch in the Big 12 championship game. I hope, because I like both the teams. And so I don't think we're going to give that pick out. I don't think we're going to take 11. I would never bet the under because I don't think they'll lose more than one game. If we were giving it out, I'd say the over, but I'd probably push. I'd bet that it push. Just they'll drop.
I think 11-1 is pretty decent. Especially not playing anyone out of conference like Nebraska is a walkthrough.
I'm excited for that game because those poor Nebraska fans are just excited for the rivalry. Like you guys.
The Big 12. They're back. They're back in the Big 12.
No, they're gonna get dog walked. It's not gonna be close. So
yeah, I would imagine, but I don't. I mean, my ultimate thoughts though is this Oklahoma team does excite me just because they actually think like when they go play a bigger SEC school, like they might have a shot of holding them to under 30, which has been a given that they're not going to do that. And they, like, Oklahoma, when they play Georgia, whatever, like they're going to have to score 45 points type thing.
And
I don't think that'll be the case this year.
I agree.
Hence, I don't know. It's like, I don't see a team that is really, I don't see an Alabama or LSU on the horizon at this point. Georgia seems like the team that maybe Georgia and Clemson seem like the top two to me as in the preseason, maybe followed right behind Ohio State. We'll see what Bama can do. That's a big if Bryce Young can. I mean, he's going to need to be good there because they're losing a lot. But
I think from all accounts he is going to be good. So I think the thing with Oklahoma from a betting standpoint is I'm looking at the odds for them. The 11-win game isn't great. They're minus 180 to win the Big 12, so that's not great. And then they're minus 450 to make the Big 12 title game. Yeah, it's just too juicy there. They're pretty much a lot to do it, but I'm not taking minus 450 for a season-long bet.
I don't think there's any value because the Big 12 sucks, so it is what it is.
But I would keep an eye on them, like when they make the playoffs. Like I think they can give those SEC teams or Clemson a run this year. This is easily the best OU team. From an experience standpoint, with a quarterback who's played, has a season under their belt. They have a very talented offense, running backs, wide receivers, offensive line. And then the story of the team is their defense. Their defense is going to be really freaking good. So I'm excited for this OU team. I think they run the table, make the playoffs, and make some noise. And I'm excited to see how they play this year.
That's pretty much how I think about them. This seems like a year for them to win a playoff game. I mean, I think they'll be there, and I think this is like
there's
their
a year
shot
to
to
make
do
it happen. Yeah. So I mean, that'll kind of round it up for Oklahoma. It's not too much to talk about in conference because I think they're gonna be favored by a touchdown in every single game, probably even against Iowa State because they have them at Norman. So keep an eye on this team. They're gonna be freaking good, and it's gonna be a fun team to watch this year. And that'll do it for today's episode. A little quick one for you guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another team breakdown. I think we're going to do Iowa State just because I think that's the only team that can push them in the Big 12. We appreciate you guys listening. Like and subscribe. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Twitter. You guys know the drill. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Peace.